Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste and I'm a therapist, and I have a special guest I'm going to have her introduce herself to you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelley Bonner. I am also a therapist and a burnout expert.
And a podcast host.
Yes. Also a
Oh,
podcaster. That's right. How could I forget?
I always forget that part too. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Burnout is something that I think a lot of people can relate to on so many different levels. And there's so many different reasons why we burn out. And, you being an expert, I know there has to be a story behind it. But before I talk about how you got to that point, I would love to hear a little bit about your upbringing.
Oh, yeah. I had a great upbringing. It's a little probably atypical than most. I grew up in the country. So I'm a country girl from upstate New York. Uh, Grew up pretty relatively normal. Have intact family, two parent intact family. My mother is originally from the UK by way of the West
Oh,
Indies, and my father is from Louisiana. So it was a nice
oh
cultural
wow.
mix to have that.
I
Yeah.
know. That is so dope.
Air Force father, so they met overseas. And then obviously, my brother was born in London. I was born in the States and was raised in that kind of environment. So that's a little bit about me growing up. I don't know that I have
Yeah.
anything remarkable, but that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, that's interesting. New York, because when people think of New York, they wouldn't think of country, but upstate is very country.
Very, very. Like I grew up from like less than an hour from Montreal, Canada, so way, way up the top of New York.
Oh gosh. Okay, yeah. So when you say New York, people probably like country if you
They
don't
never get it
really.
right. They always go
Yeah.
New York City, and then you say no further up, and they're like 20 minutes outside of the city. It's like no, New York's like
No.
7 hours top to bottom. I'm way at the end.
Okay, so growing up in this kind of mixed cultured home, which just sounds amazing. And then did you decide to go to college?
Yeah, I went
What
to
made you become a
college.
therapist?
Um, I had always just been interested. I wanted to do the law first for a long time, and I wanted to do like public defending law, and quickly got out of that that idea, and fell in love with just wanting to help people. I always wanted to do that. I think I wanted to do it more from a research lens. But it gave me an opportunity. When I went to college, I loved research. I loved the clinical aspects. And then I went to graduate school, and that's where I married. I came back full circle to I wanted to do forensic social work. So I got back into having like a master's in criminal justice and a master's in social work. So I kind of brought those two back together. And I had decided for a long time that I wanted to do like prison social work was actually what had been my dream for a long time.
Wow. So do you consider yourself you enjoy learning and studying, it
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
like. Is that
Oh,
something
yeah.
that was kind of placed in you through your parents, or you feel like it was your personality type?
I think it's a mostly that I was a curious person, but also like
Yeah.
culturally, it was an expectation to,
Yeah.
be a learner, to kind of figure out what you want to do. And then I was just naturally curious. Like I'm one of those people that I would probably still be in school. Like I would just do another degree, and I'm like, no, I got to pay bills. So I didn't do that, but I would have been like the person that, because I'm always
Uh-huh.
curious about things and random
Oh,
things. So it'd be like I'm just getting a random degree that wouldn't help medieval history. I just want to know. That seems interesting. Like I'm that kind of person. So that definitely was in me from the get go.
oh wow, that's so cool. So you go get this degree, and then what kind of work did you do out of college?
So my first job out of college was actually working in the prison system. So I had
Oh,
interned and I'd wanted to. Like I had, this kind of gets into why I decided to go into burnout later in life. But I had really kind of pictured what I wanted my life to be like, where I wanted to live, where I wanted to work, what kind, like very
at
detailed.
20?
And
At
yeah,
20?
by 22, I
Wow.
had done all that. And then by 27, that was all up in smoke and flames. But I was really kind of really sure that I wanted to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
And so I went off and did it and got the job. My first job out of college I was about 24. It was working in a prison system. It was the exact prison system I wanted to work in.
So that's the only place I never work because it seems scary to have the doors closed on you and be on the
Everyone
other
says
side.
that.
But you were fine. You were.
It never
Wow.
bothered me. I mean, there was other things that came to bother me about working in a
Yeah.
prison system,
Yeah.
but it wasn't that. I mean, everybody says it. Like, you're really scared that the gate, when it closes, you're not going to be able to get out. I mean, I worked in
Yeah.
a men's prison, and I was like, I don't know that they would necessarily mistaken me back then for one of the folks that were
Yeah.
incarcerated, but it never bothered
Right.
me. I mean, there were times that it was, I think things that people don't realize about prison is, like, I worked in a maximum security prison, is there's a lot of movement in prison. I think people think that everybody's locked down 24/7, and I did work in that part. I ran the most secure part of the maximum security prison, but there's a lot of movement, so there'd be a lot of times where there'd be 80, 90 folks kind of in the hallway lining, going different places. And so that
Oh.
part was sometimes, rarely, but sometimes a little anxiety producing. Mostly it was actually when I was by myself and there'd be like someone just hanging out in a corner and there's no visibility, that I would be even a little bit most scared. But for the most part, I wasn't really scared of that environment for those reasons.
So you're in there, you're doing probably brief counseling work with the guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're enjoying that process. How long do you stay at the prison?
I was there for about 3 years, and I really enjoyed. I did a couple programs. So I ran a behavior modification program for the worst behaved inmates in New York State. Like, they would
Did
fail
you
out of multiple
create it?
programs.
You
They
created it
basically,
too?
yeah, you had to create it because they said call it this, but they didn't give you any tools, nothing, and you're like, okay, I guess we're
No,
gonna make it
but
up as we go along.
the type of person you are, like, I'm not surprised. I'm like, I figured you would have created because you just seem like you're a systems person where you can like
Yes,
create a bunch. You see the issue and you can see the solution and you put it
it
together.
was
Like, it's
fun.
easy. I can
Yeah, that
tell
was
you.
fun. I had a great time. That was honestly, like, I did other things clinically afterward, but the most fun I ever had was running that program, and it seems like it shouldn't
Wow.
have been that fun. Like, these were the worst behaved people in all of New York State who failed
Wow.
out of multiple max prisons because they were so badly behaved. And so, like, just fix them because they're not behaving, and they're doing like years in like solitary as sentences, and they're like, just do something with them. And so we had
Wow.
about 12 people we'd rotate in, and every day you'd go down for a couple hours and work with them on different skills. We had
Yeah.
a blast. I mean, I
Wow.
honestly, it was really fun. I had a
You're a
lot of great memories.
You're such a dope person. Oh my goodness. I mean, just watching you smile, I could tell when things bring people joy. I could see, but just the type of personality you have, I know you're able to like make stuff easily, like in your sleep.
Thanks. It was
Uh,
fun. It was fun
yeah,
till it wasn't, but it was that part of it was always, as you know, as a therapist, like, those moments with the people you work with
I
is what makes
know.
it all worth it. And I've had that multiple
Absolutely.
times, but
Yeah.
that was the best concentration of, just because of the environment and how toxic and horrible it was, and being able to craft like
Right.
microseconds of like joy for these folks was so fun for me. I was like a kid again. We'd play like Jeopardy,
Oh,
and like we'd watch movies, and when they'd have like a day, like if things were going well, we would get like a movie. And that was just like, it was such a treat to see that side of folks and to be able to give that to them, that was what made it so enjoyable for me.
wow. Kelly's right. As a therapist working in different systems, even when the space was not the best, the working with people has always like brought me so much joy. So you're there for 3 years. Then what's your next job after that?
After I spectacularly burned out of that job for reasons that you can now come back to, assuming I've defied all the odds of like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make no, it does make sense. The reason you think you'd burn out of prison is exactly why I burned out of working in a prison system. But then I went to work. I
Wait,
did very
Kelly. So just for my audience, you're saying you burnt out, but at the time, would you have named it that when you
no,
left? This is
I
hindsight.
didn't know
Okay.
to call it
Okay.
burnout till 10
Okay.
years later, maybe a
Okay.
little less than that. But yeah,
Okay.
I just was like, I gotta get out of here. I knew I couldn't do that work anymore. Like, I was like
Okay.
in a puddle on the floor and said, oh no, 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 I'm not functional. And I was gonna kill me. So I was like, I gotta get out of here. But I went from there to I went to the veterans. I went for the VA for a while and really enjoyed
Okay.
that. I'll be honest, not as much as I enjoyed the prison system, which is throws people for a loop. But I had some amazing. I worked particularly, my favorite that I had worked with there is I work with people who had combat PTSD, And so
Wow.
I worked with them, and we did a. It was for people who were like more likely to be hospitalized or struggling with functioning, and it was just so awesome to see some of them become back to themselves and fully functional.
Yeah.
And then I burned out of that, but mildly, not anything like that before. I just got tired, and then I went overseas for a while and did psychoeducational work on military bases, and did sexual violence work and prevention and program building overseas with
Yeah.
violence prevention and different things like that.
So Kelly's somebody that loves challenges. It
Yes.
can't be boring. You need to, your job has to have some challenges. You can't stay in the same thing too long, right?
Yes, that I think I'm a little bit better than I was before, but yes, always like
Yeah.
if you tell me I can't do it, then that's exactly what I'm going to do then. In that case then, oh okay. That's my next stop. What tell me something else I can't do. I've
Right,
always
right,
kind of been
right.
that person and had to unlearn some of the things about that are healthy and some of them are not so
Yeah.
healthy as well.
Yeah. So we keep using this word burnout, right? And so these different jobs you mentioned, you've had a wealth of different places you were at. Let's define burnout for people that might be
Yeah.
listening, because when you go back in time, you're able to see clearly the ways that you burned out in the different places you were. But let's define burnout for people that may not know.
Yeah, the easiest way to find burnout is just, I say it's a simple equation, and I'm by no means a math expert, so I know it's got to be simple. And that is just basically what happens when there's too many demands and not enough resources over a long period of time. So it's like, and demands can be pretty broad. I mean, most times burnout is spoken about in the workplace context, but you could broaden that to anything. Too
Mhm.
many relationship demands and not enough emotional resources for it, right? Too much workplace demands and there isn't any materials or time off support or any structure. Anything that has that equation where it's just unequal, right? You're asking us more is being
Yeah.
asked of you than you have the materials, the resources, internal or outside of yourself to give.
So, and speaking of burnout, I talk to people all day, and I see a lot of burnout, but especially as a Black woman, do you feel like when these things were happening, you try to make up for resources or try to do more than you should have been doing? What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly a lot of times, I think Black women particularly are under resourced to begin with, right? Just by the systems in place that kind of keep us always having to try to scrap for a little something. And
Yeah,
the demands never stop, if not, they're even greater. And so you find
yeah,
yourself wanting to bridge the gap with just sheer will. And I
yeah.
think that a lot of Black folks and Black women in particular, we're high achievers. We want to do things, but it always feels like we're trying to make up for something. And that in itself leads to burnout and it accelerates it.
Yeah, and what ways, like, do you remember any like physical manifestations of what it looked like for you when you look back at the times that you felt like you was experiencing burnout?
Yeah, I mean, a lot for me at like the peak of like my worst kind of burnout. It was a lot of anxiety, which burnout is linked to anxiety and sometimes to depressive symptoms. I had
Mhm.
both. But what sticks out to me as behaviors is like I was always like rushing, go, 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 go,
Yeah.
go, which is an anxious sign, right? I was
Yeah.
like always being busy and high energy. I was masking it as like everyone thought I was like high energy and really positive and all those things. And that was just the way I was masking what was probably not even low level, probably moderate at that point, anxiety that I wasn't able to name it and therefore wasn't able to be able to deal with it. Had a lot of headaches, a lot of stomach issues as well,
Yeah.
like a lot of physical symptoms as well that happened because I was burned out and didn't know that these were all the things that were happening because of that.
Yeah, and which you specialize in kind of like in workplace burnout and the culture. And it's interesting. I'm glad I have you on today because I've been talking about this a lot with my clients. Um, it sounds like companies, quote unquote, reward people who do well with more work. And then there's this kind of that validation and praise. You feel like you're doing a good job, but it's like at what expense? What are your thoughts about that process that a lot of people, especially Black people, go through?
Yeah, I think a lot about the way I think about burnout and need to just force myself to write about it is that I really do think that burnout is both like personal issue, like a personal responsibility, and it is also a systemic responsibility. And we talk a
Yeah.
lot about the personal responsibility, with a lot of tips and tools, which is amazing and wonderful, but we
Yeah.
often forget that there's a lot of things about work that we are conditioned into believing that are just lies. And on the personal level, a lot of people go to work to fulfill gaps and issues in their lives. Like we look at work, we look for validation from our boss, like it's our daddy. And we look, and it's like they can't be your daddy and they cannot make that up because they're inherently not there to care about you as an individual. They're there to care about their bottom line. But we
Yeah.
get stuck into this whole kind of cycle of like, I really want validation, then we are marginalized and not seen a lot in the work. So we're constantly trying to prove, like, pay attention to me. And it's that cycle that benefits a workplace. That is a system that tells you if you work hard, you're going to get a reward. That's what people sign up for. But the reality is, as we know, it's like you talk to people and they're doing it, but you're like, do you know anybody that looks like you? That's getting the promotion. Have you got a promotion? Have they called?
Right.
I could tell you story after story, and yet I was still going, and I'm like, I don't see anybody benefiting, but I'll be the one, right? Like, let me jump in this race
Yeah.
and work until I die, and think that somehow someone's going to be like, wow, you're incredible, Kelley. Let's lift you up to where you belong. It's like that did not happen, and even when it did happen, in some smaller ways, it still always had this backdoor kind of painful moment or something else would fall apart. And so I think we believe in that a lot, and it's
Mhm.
because the system tells us to.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that you mentioned the part of the connection. I've never made that connection with any of my clients or even like consciously about how work can be a replacer. I know it can, we use it sometimes to cope with things, but not like thinking about the validation that we haven't gotten in the past and how that fills a void. That's something powerful I think people need to hear because the way we're talking about it, obviously people aren't thinking about it that deeply. They're just going to work and showing up, right?
Yes. It's well, so much about it is like, for me, it wasn't so much like the love I didn't get from my daddy as much as it was just
Right,
like
right,
I
right.
always wanted to be seen and
Right,
I
right,
wanted
right.
to be valued, and systemically and in other areas in my life, it's like I didn't always feel like I was being seen. And
Right,
work,
right,
you
right.
talk to people, they'll tell you. I mean, you meet with people all the time, probably you're talking about their work and what are some of their gripes. Like, I'm working hard, nobody cares. I'm not being
Yeah.
recognized. And it becomes this trap where you think the answer is to work harder or to be brighter and to be seen.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
but that's the system. It knows that if it just ignores you, you'll actually do those things, right? If it doesn't
Yeah.
give you what you need, you'll keep working toward
Yeah.
this inevitable goal of validation, of compensation. And it's not all workplaces, but I mean, honestly, not to go too deep today, but work is inherently exploitive. I mean, we don't even need to go into
No, go
slavery. We could
ahead.
just
You're
look
you're
at,
right. You're absolutely right.
but like, if we look at just like for me, like I looked at just at the Industrial Revolution in the United States. Like when you look at this is white folks who exploited white folks, right? The Irish, the Italians,
Yeah.
every immigrant. When you look at factory culture and modernization of work, it is all about underpaying, overworking, abusing workers to hit a bottom line.
Yeah.
And that is work. And so,
Yeah.
yes, there are some, I don't want to make it seem like they're not good bosses and they're not people who don't
Right, right, right.
care. But when that, just like we talk about racism, right? When your history is exploitive,
Hmm.
and that is what you come from, how can you not pretend that in 2023 it's not still taking some pieces of that it's exploiting, it's overworking, it's undercompensating, it's about the bottom line and not really people centered.
Yeah, no, Kelly's absolutely right. And even if it's not related to a childhood thing, I think in general, what we've seen, how how the work, how work works, we just kind of fall in line with the culture. And a lot of it takes a lot of resistance on the individual level, right? Because there's the systems piece, and then there's the individual piece. And I think if we become aware, and this is why this episode is going to be so good, because when you become aware of the systems piece, you don't have to succumb to the environment. And I know for people that may be finding some type of um, their understanding about what we're talking about, and it's like, how do I start that process? Like, what do you say to people that may realize, you know what, I have been burnt out and I can feel it in my system? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I think part of it is redefining work for yourself and what is meaningful work. And I think that's
Yeah.
like the last place we go. We just go, I got to get a check. Like nobody actually goes into work expecting to have any measure of joy. I mean, that seems laughable. And I'm sure there's people laughing at that. Like, work's a lot of things, but joy is not the word I would use to describe my workplace. And I think, but it is flipping that on its head, and in the sense of, when you understand that this is just a trap, this need to be seen, this overworking, that this is a
Mhm.
trap that someone over here is going to tell you, oh, keep doing it, this is a great idea. When you realize it's not, it then becomes about, well, what do I want work to mean? Like, what do I want it to mean to myself? And that redefines things. And that doesn't mean that you don't become a good worker or that
Right.
you abuse the system, right? And just like, I
Right.
don't know, I'm not doing anything, catch me.
Right.
But it does become, I'm not going to die for a job that is not going to validate me. And I'm going to look for other places. If work is not a place of joy, then where can I find it? How can I make this position feed what matters to me? And so I tell people to start with like getting clear on what matters, like what actually
I
matters
love
to you,
that.
and
Mhm.
work from there.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's amazing. Now, with you, kind of, this is kind of like your bag that you're in. Do you notice an even more kind of burnout? People are burning out more with the pandemic, lack of workers, high demand. Do you notice people trying to keep up, but they're feel like they're failing miserably, not being able to recognize that they don't even have the resources that they need to succeed?
Yeah, definitely the pandemic, as you know, like it is like a global phenomenon where everybody was like collectively traumatized, right?
Hmm.
Collectively facing mortality, like literally, like we could die. There was a time
Yeah.
in 2020 where people said, no, really, I could
Yeah.
die if I go outside and breathe air
Right.
near someone,
Right.
right? And then
Right.
people had lots of people in their family, particularly in Black communities,
Yeah.
that died from COVID-19. And so we have this collective traumatic event, but then, as you know, you don't process it in the moment. You process it later when things are a little calmer. It's like your
Mhm.
body does what it needs to do to survive. And then when it realizes, oh, we're not in imminent danger, that's when everybody falls apart. People will tell you all the time, like, that's when I got sick. That not one of the bad thing was happening. When things
Yeah.
got good, now all of a sudden I can't get out of bed. And so I feel like we're under resourced because of that. There's like this kind of like collective hangover from the pandemic.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
trying to push through a lot of those things. And cool, it's the benefit. There's been like a cultural revolution around work. There's like people like these
It's
Gen Z
true.
folks is
Very
not doing
quiet.
that. I don't they're like, y'all could do that. Good for you. I'm quitting. That's what I'm going to do. And so the system has had to reconcile with the fact that, like, oh, wait a minute, we got to figure this out. Like, people are not okay with the way we've been doing
Yeah.
things, because we also realize, if I could die in 2020, is this how I want to die? Like, at this job? Staying till 8 o'clock at night, not seeing my partner, my kids, my friends, any
Right.
watching my favorite TV show? Is that
Right.
it? This can't be all there is to life. And I feel like that's all swirled around, that has made us like work a little harder, then not want to work so hard, then try to figure it out as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say, when Kelly's talking about the trauma, like I remember going to school, working, doing all this stuff. I didn't start feeling depressed until I finished school. It's like I should be happy, but those systems, I'm not like running and surviving and trying to make it through. And the second thing I want to say, because there are people that look at Gen Zs as lazy, and back in my day, but back in people, when older people are dying at 50 and 60, not because we don't have the ability to live long, because our system is shutting down on us. And so, what do you say to people that may look at Gen Zs who want this kind of life that doesn't affect their mental health that way? Because I don't think people understand. I'm always having conversations with older people when they're talking about it, and I'm like, they're just choosing not to like live or survive like we survived years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I think the young millennials and Gen Z have figured out that this is kind of a con, right? And it's like, you all, and also, to be fair, to like, I'm a geriatric millennial. Disrespectful, but that's what they call us.
Ryan.
Disrespectful, but that's what they call us. I'm a geriatric millennial, and what I have realized is like my parents, they'll tell you, like my dad's like, oh, work is not, he told me when he retired, he's like, I could not work the way you all work. That he acknowledged that the system of work is even worse than when he was. So there was a time like older Gen X and young baby boomers, they actually got their retirement. They actually got the benefits in the bag. We're being told there's no Social Security for you. If there's no Social Security for me, why am I dying today? Like, there's going to be nothing later. So I might as well go to yoga, prioritize seeing my friends, prioritize going on TikTok if I want to go on TikTok. And if you cannot provide for me, and then they'll come in, provide mental health services. What's your mental health services? Oh, you don't have an answer? Gen Z is shutting down. Thank you. They're moving on. They're not even finishing the interview. What's your diversity, equity, and inclusion policy and plan to elevate all folks? You don't have one. You can't say it. It's 5 white people saying, named Todd, being like, yeah, we care about diversity. They're shutting down immediately. And they're saying next interview. And they genuinely don't care. It's wild to me because I'm like, don't you have bills? They're probably because geriatric millennials and Gen Xers are probably, they're still living with us. But I mean, the point is they don't care. And to that, I say bravo in that sense, good for y'all, because if you don't take a stand, it's going to stay this way.
Yeah, that's so true. Now, Kelley has a podcast called Black Girl Burnout. Can you explain how that came about? I think we have an idea, but I love the fact that it's catered to us because of just how, most of my population is Black women, and I'm constantly like reminding them to breathe and slow down. And I just think the way the culture is set up, the way we've watched our caregivers work, and we don't really know how to take care of, and we suffer because of it.
Beautifully said, and I agree. And that's basically what Black Girl Burnout was kind of born out of, this realization that there's a lot of cultural lies that we've been told as Black women about what it means to be a Black woman. And that becomes almost, it's like synonymous and equal to the struggle. That when you see the people, like we watched our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, we watched them do incredible things, but a lot of us didn't watch them do them joyfully. Right? We watched them do it with exhaustion. We watched them do it through struggle. It's all about what they overcame, what they triumphed over. And so the podcast to me was about teaching women that they could opt out of lives of struggle, that they didn't have to inherit that, and they didn't have to believe that lie, that there's other ways to live, that we're meant to be joyful, that we're meant to have community and to have like these abundant lives. And so it's this really practical exploration of like, how do you opt out of that? And how do you get over here? How do you get to a life of joy? And how do you know that you deserve it? And that is, in fact, the truth of the way you should be living.
Yeah, I love that. And for people that may find some kind of hope in it, can you just let them know how when you've been doing things a certain way, trying to work on change can be challenging, and it's okay, it's part of the process?
Yes, change is not easy, and I think everybody, like I have an interview component to the show too, so I always bring on Black women, and I'm always like, they always have this moment where they're like, and the struggle was real, and I had to opt out of that, and it was hard, and it wasn't easy, but every single one of them says that the other side of that was joy, and none of them who chose to go down that path of changing their lives and making those changes, none of them ended up homeless. None of them ended up alone. Everybody hates me. I wish I never did it. Every single one of those women tells me that their life is better than it's ever been because of that moment of choosing to change, whether it's therapy or doing some other physical things for yourself that you need to be doing. Whatever that is, at the end of it is joy.
Yeah, I love that. How could people find the podcast and find out more about you if they wanted to reach out?
Sure. So you can find out about the podcast, Black Girl Burnout, Instagram, TikTok, all the places, and then blackgirlburnout.com. It's across all major platforms, so you can download it anywhere. You just Google that. And then for me, if you want to connect with me personally, it's Kelley A. Bonner is available, and then kellybonner.com for me.
And before you go, since we are talking about burnout, how do you prevent burnout for yourself? Like, what are your practices that you do?
I do a couple small things. So I'll give the smallest thing people can do. I have a morning routine,
Yeah.
and the morning routine, like mine can be a lot, but I tell you where I started. I started 15 minutes, 10 minutes. And it was like simply I used an app called Fabulous, and it prompted me to drink water. The minute I woke up, I had water by my bed, took a sip of water. It prompted me to like listen to some inspirational 2-3 minutes of coaching of like you can do it, and like really thoughtful ideas. I would like make my bed. That was part of my routine. Brush my teeth. I have a skincare that I like, my favorite skincare product. All of that could be done within 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that anchored me. That was like the way that I anchored myself. And then I make space to reflect and be clear before I end my day. So I have a very clear start to my day. It could be 5 minutes to 15 minutes. I have a very clear end to my day that can be 5 to 10 minutes where I'm like, I stop what I'm doing. I put my phone away. I pick up, like for me, it's a book. I will write a gratitude list at the end of my day. But having clear beginnings and endings to your day is really goes a long way. It's one small thing you can start with that really goes a long way to preventing burnout.
I love it. I feel like we do the same thing in the morning. I listen to something because it helps me get up at 5 so I can start my workout. And making up my bed is if my husband doesn't make up if I come home and he's still if he was sleeping when I left and it's not made up, I'm pissed off because it's something about making up the bed that just like sets the tone for me when I make it up.
It took forever to get there. I was not a person who believed in making my bed. I'll be honest. It took to like 38 for me to be like, making my bed. That's a thing. We should do it. Why aren't we doing
Yeah.
it? I love it now.
I have my adult
Before that,
clients do it when I'm trying to get them to start a routine. I was like, let's just start with the bed, and they're like, Celeste, I've been making up my bed. I'm like, yeah, it definitely. I think you're a therapist, so it builds confidence in your ability to
yes.
do more. And I don't think I think we're looking for the bigger picture, right? Because I love the fact that you talk about the practical things. Because if you talk about literally everything, people are like, oh my god, I can't do that. But you're like, no, like just start like with this one
Make your
thing. I think,
bed. Drink some water.
yeah.
I just tell people take a sip of water. If you can't do anything else I said today, wherever you're at, take a sip of water. That's it.
Yep.
If nothing
Yep.
else,
I
hydrate.
love
And
it.
bed making, it creates beauty. Like it creates beauty, and it's more like I deserve this. I deserve to
Yeah.
slide into bed and have it look great and be made up nice because that's what I deserve. A little bit of that in my life, and on top of the confidence.
And speaking of really quick, I deserve for people listening, because you mentioned that earlier, doing action oriented things of what you deserve will help your mind believe. And even if you don't believe it, because I know people struggle with believing what they deserve. And I think that's a beautiful thing to say. Yeah.
Yeah, we deserve it.
Kelley, thank you. This was awesome. I appreciate your time. I appreciate learning about this. Make sure you guys check out the show notes so that you can learn more about Kelley and tap into her podcast because it's for us.